I want y'all, the artists, the everyday people, the black and brown queer people, to tell your story, because who is asking us to tell our story? We're not going to all get to be celebrities. We're not all going to be walking down the red carpet. But we all want that moment to say, like, I am me and I'm special for myself. Like, what do you want the world to hear about your experience? And what have you been through that, you know, maybe you haven't had your moment to talk about? Just like talk. I just want to talk to y'all. So I want to ask y'all, when did you first realize you were queer?
I've had 4 different realizations. It's been like 4 of them. There was the bisexual realization. Wrong, by the way. I'm not bisexual. Then I had the girl realization, which was I read a fan fiction and I was like, oh no, I relate to this experience too much. Then third realization was the lesbian realization of like, oh, do I like men? There was the poly realization where I was in a relationship for a little while and then I realized, oh, do I even want to be in a monogamous relationship? So it's just a continuing cycle of, you know, realizations that the standards that people put onto me didn't necessarily fit, you know?
I was 5 years old and I was watching Aladdin with my babysitter. Do you know the scene where Jasmine gets out of like the hourglass and she's like in all red and she's like trying to like distract Jafar, but she's like seducing him from Aladdin? That. I just kept replaying that over and over, and I was like, this is normal. But I remember, but because I also felt the same feelings for men, I kind of just assumed that everyone got this feeling, or everyone had like the crushes in the cartoon characters that were men, and I was like, oh, it's fine, it's just like nothing.
I think it's like movies, like Swan Princess, Belle, Princess Jasmine. Like at that age, I'd be like, oh my god, they're so pretty. Like it wasn't that I wanted to be them, I wanted to be with them. But like I didn't understand that until probably like 13.
I think like, you know, like the cliche of like, oh, I always knew. But like, yeah, the pivotal like aha moment, it wasn't even aha moment for real, because I was just like in 7th grade and I was sitting down and like, I don't even remember what class, it was like a random class, and I was next to my friend and like, I was thinking about it, I was like, I might be gay. And then like the next period I turned to my friend, I was like, hey, I'm bi. Like I just came out, like, it was like not even like a question.
It's interesting because my first queer realization was not where I am now. It was like the realization that I liked boys in 7th grade. No, 8th grade, like spring of 8th grade. I remember I was on like a school trip and I looked over and I saw this boy and I was like, oh, I think I like that. And that, I think for a lot of queer people, like when you have that realization, it's like you have that moment and then you just like put it away. You're like, I can't deal with this right now. So I definitely did that for a bit, but I think that was the moment where I was like, okay, something's a little bit different. And that something has like a word to it that I know that people talk about. But I think the jokes is how I first got like introduced to what queerness was in all regards. Like a lot of the experiences in school, especially, it's like the jokes. There's always either a joke being made at you because you're a little fruity, a little something, a little this or that, yeah. Or there's just like jokes in the air. You hear like, oh, that's gay, or like identify as an attack helicopter. That was something for a while.
When I first started like having feelings for others, I didn't recognize my feelings to be gender specific. So a lot of what I felt was mostly just pressure to have crushes on guys. Because a lot of the media that I was consuming was just about like being like 10 years old and having a big ass crush on some guy. And so I kind of a little bit like focused myself towards forcing crushes to have on people because it's like, this is how I'm normal. In the environments that I grew up in, I had a lot of difficulty feeling normal a lot of the time. So I would just grasp on anything that would make me feel a bit more normal. And so the performing this heterosexuality really felt like a normality for me.
Also, growing up, I remember just like everyone would kind of press me about that stuff. I feel like people knew before I knew. They would be like, you know, are you queer? Are you this? And it was sort of an insult when you're younger, but when I was older, I could thank those people because I feel like it really guided my decision and made me feel secure in my identity once I realized. But for me, I feel like being heterosexual was like a performance sometimes for me. So I never had like genuine feelings for like any like heterosexual dynamic I was part of.
What was your experience coming out to your family?
I think like I kind of just like sat my mom down first. It was during quarantine. I kind of just told her, and I was like, hey, I think that I've always liked girls as much as I do men. And my mom wasn't surprised. She was like, oh, okay. And it was a very like quick thing. Then I told my dad, and he was like, okay. So that was nice. I told my grandmother, and she was like,
I think part of why it felt like so weird is because I knew what I was coming out as like wasn't my final form, or like, and that like I thought I knew what it meant for me also. So I just like grabbed onto that and ran with it. But then a couple years later, being like hit in the face with the realization of like, oh shit, like I have to transition, like this has to happen. Throughout a lot of my early years, like as living as a gay boy, it was like not understanding why I was doing what I was doing. Like why was I putting on makeup like every day in secret? Like why did I love like dressing up in heels? But like the fact that I had to justify and validate myself to others, I think kind of like blocked me from getting to that place where I could like fully realize myself and like realize who I was.
So I came out to my mom and my dad during quarantine. I feel like quarantine was a lot of like different changes for everyone. In my head, I thought like the day my parents were gonna find out, like even my family was gonna find out that I was gay, like I like women, the day I married a woman and they came to my wedding. And like that was in my head. I was like, yeah, like that's what they're gonna find out. Like too bad for them. Like
It's a lot easier to like just not explain shit, just be like, yeah, no, okay, moving on. Like, I don't feel like doing the work of coming out anymore, especially like not in spaces where I would be like welcomed and things like that. So
yeah, just really exhausting.
I've been blessed with the work of generations to come to a place where I can just be who I am and not have that be a deciding factor in my life. Like not have who I love and what I do with that love, who I have sex with, who I'm attracted to, all that shit, my identity not be a deciding factor in the things that I want to do with my life. It's gonna exist. I have like, especially living in New York City, I have the ability to just like exist in my queerness, in my like the luxury of being a lesbian in New York City. It's just like you can just be a fucking lesbian and you don't have to explain that shit. It's like magical realism, but like you're gay.
My mom, she's Jamaican and Nevasan, so she's a Caribbean parent, and her side did not take it very well. There's a lot of homophobia in Caribbean islands, but I can only speak for Jamaica in specific. So there was a lot of like, oh, you're bi or you're pan, it's a phase. And I came out to her when I was like about 13 years old. That my mom's just like, at the end of the day, I just want grandkids. Just give me 3, and I want you to be happy. But it took her a good 7 to 8 years to finally come around, which I was very fortunate. But my grandparents on my mom's side, the Caribbean side, didn't really come around to that, and I also got outed, which really sucked.
I am Dominican and Ecuadorian. Yeah, I'm half Dominican, half Ecuadorian. Dominicans are Ecuadorians to an extent, but especially Dominicans. The culture is not that accepting because we are a very Christian, like focused culture in both my countries. And yeah, I just knew like sometimes it's gonna be hard to bridge that gap with someone else from like a Dominican background or like an Ecuadorian background or like any Latino background. we have to go through a lot of things because colonialization has unfortunately made our culture to be just unaccepting towards LGBTQIA people as a whole. We still exist though, but it's just a culture of unacceptance.
Both my parents are South American and Jewish. My mom is Peruvian and my dad is Uruguayan. I don't think I ever really saw myself either. I didn't see gay Latino men being represented, especially effeminate ones, and then I didn't see brown trans people or barely any trans people, period. Or people that I realized were trans. I think about this a lot. If I had exposure just to the existence of queer and trans people earlier, what would my life have been? If I had known that that was even a possibility for me.
A lot of the other queer Dominicans I've talked to also express this kind of feeling of a lot of Dominican culture is rooted in heterosexuality and performing heterosexuality and performing for white supremacy. A lot of the culture is rooted around that. So when you aren't trying to do that, you're gonna have a hard time collecting and picking and forming Dominican culture around that. The relationship Dominicans have with queerness is very tied to the relationship they have with religion, and viewing the worst thing you could do is sin, so the worst thing you could do is be queer.
My parents are Colombian. My family specifically, it's so complicated. I know a lot of it is because of people have been separated, people have, especially in Colombia with the violence that has happened. My family has I have direct family members that were affected by the violence. It's so difficult when I want to go up to those family members that are homophobic, that are racist. As much as I want to kind of condemn them for it and be this is not okay, you should know better, I've never known what it's like to experience that violence.
But internally working on a lot of self-acceptance to know that yes, I love my culture and we have issues too, especially with queerness. It's illegal to be gay in Jamaica. You can get killed for being gay in Jamaica. For a long time it was just hush don't tell, which is a very stereotypical Caribbean or ethnic thing to be oh, well yeah, we accept these people. Some people are like that. My parents accepted other people being queer, but then when it came to me, they're no. So for a while there was more resentment in that part. The hardest thing was not just the level of self-acceptance. I had to be wow, there's a version of me where they wanted me to be straight, and now I feel I'm disappointing them because I'm not that version of the person that they wanted me to be.
In a Haitian family, and obviously I present as my authentic self in public. In the private space, specifically of my family, it's a bit more complicated because they haven't really taken that well to it so far. I'm hoping that they turn around and everything, but it is tough because they do dead naming. I really ended up retreating into the internet a lot. I ended up going on I got a Tumblr at 6th grade, but I was active online because that was the place where I could see myself. There was a kind of
safe space.
Yeah, it was a safe space. It gave me this internal joy, even if it wasn't something that I could have in real life. Because like Jasmine, I just was in very white spaces, and that just doesn't really mesh well with me.
That shit is debilitating.
So I want to talk about being Black in queer spaces. What's been your experience going into queer spaces and being a person of color?
No, yeah, I feel a lot of times in queer spaces, when it's not dominated by Black people, or at least a person of color, if there's a lot of white gay men or even white gay women, I feel just because of their gayness, they think that they're no longer white or they're no longer a man. And they think that they can just say anything or do anything, and it's not a problem. And I'm no, that is a problem.
Because I think if you're in New York City, you can easily fall into predominantly white spaces, and it's not a horrible thing. But it definitely is a reality, especially if you go like to Bushwick or like Manhattan. We don't have a lot of uptown spaces, but there's uptown spaces being built for sure. There's more smaller, but yeah, I think that when you're in, there's expectation. I feel as if like we have to open up our spaces to everyone because that's what the gay community has always done. We've always been open, we accepted everyone. But I think it's really beautiful to be in a just QT BIPOC space, like just queer, trans, Black and Indigenous people of color space, because I feel like, as I said, we are double marginalized. Like we experience like homophobia and also racism, xenophobia, all these things. And I feel like maybe it's like a trauma bond thing, but it's also a feeling of being understood more so. And I think also you face some instances of being fetishized or sexualized or masculinized, especially if you're like a black woman who identifies as gay or like a black queer person as a whole. You do tend to face like masculinization when you're in certain spaces. Right. And also like I just believe you can face more violence in white spaces. They're not horrible. It's life. Like, you know, you're gonna interact with people like that. But I definitely feel that it's great to just explore your identity in closed spaces because you can understand each other. And I think there's a lot of resiliency in like the queer Black and brown community. So I definitely feel the difference, and I feel more at home when I'm around other like Black and brown people who are queer, because we really are down for each other. Like I feel like we really, like, if someone really needs help, like we'll open like our houses up, we'll donate, we'll do things. And it's like that sense of community, I feel like it's hard to have that in like predominantly white spaces, because I feel like not generalizing, but it's like white supremacy gives people an inherently like individualistic outlook on life, and we don't have that when you're Black and brown. You have a more communal outlook, and I think that helps you thrive more so.
I officially left the predominantly white space that I was in when I was like 16 years old. It just felt so eye-opening, because that was the first time in my life where I was like considered as an option versus being the last choice, taken seriously. So that really boosted my confidence. I definitely felt a huge shift, and just in like confidence, but also who I get to connect to. Like, I'm with these people that have only had this one experience, so they're not going to be aware of the racism. But then being around people of color, it's like, yeah, we've been followed in stores before. Yeah, I've had people make really fucked up comments about my hair or my skin tone, and like there's strength in that, but there's also so much more strength in like what we've been through. It's just like I finally feel seen by these people because we share the same culture, or even if we don't share the same culture, we have similar experiences of like navigating the cultural norms, because it's hard to explain to your white friend why you can't do certain things that they can.
I think gender and race are so intertwined, just by the nature of how race was constructed. Gender it feels like while it has existed before race existed, it was shifted and changed when race was created for the purpose of race. And so the genders that we deal with now, the genders that we talk about now, and how we view gender are immediately completely different from how we viewed it before race happened and before all that stuff, because you view femininity through we are raised to view femininity through the lens of white supremacy. What's the most feminine, like when you're raised, like obviously not now, but like what's the most feminine thing you could think of? And it's this blonde, blue-eyed woman who's petite and skinny and has this pink dress, but it's not too pink, and it's like very delicate, and she's very classy and very nice, and that's femininity. That's femininity. And so when you are not that, you're kind of left with just like, so what the fuck is femininity? And it comes back to what we were talking about earlier about how Black and brown women and girls perform femininity. I love seeing Black and brown femininity because it comes from such a place of nature. It's like rooted in the ground. And it's like, I don't like saying like, oh my God, I love it because it's fought for, because it's like, we're all romanticized the fight of everything. But there's it's like brown butter. It's like, it's a little bit burnt, but like, it's fucking amazing, and it makes every single thing taste better. And it takes a minute to get there. And there's value in that. Like
like even like I'm saying like the idea of being like a black woman, like I feel like even though I identify as non-binary and like I go by they them, like I still consider myself a black woman because I feel like that's
ask you about that. Like,
that is
that's how I feel too.
Yeah, it's like it's such an experience growing up as a black woman, and it's like it's an identity that I still carry with myself. Like I'm not like, and I know some people might not, and that's completely fine. But for me, yeah. Recently, I came out as like a lesbian, and I feel like that was much more of a struggle for me because I think I was holding on to the fact that like I could like men, or like, you know, there's a possibility like you know, be in that relationship and like meet the standard that society wanted me to meet. Seeing the way couples were portrayed in like media or anything, it was always like a man and a woman, you know, like for the most part, and it felt like, oh, like that was the normal, that's what I had to be, and like I could technically force myself to feel those feelings. So obviously if I could even like think of having those feelings, like that means that I obviously like men, and I think I was just like, yeah, I was definitely like pushing that on myself.
I still like took on the label of like I'm queer, but you know, I date whoever I'm interested in. But it wasn't until like I was about 22 that I was like, okay, like I'm gay. Like I know I'm gay. I feel like it's honestly internalized, and it's like even though no one was overtly telling me things, being like, you know, you have to be this way. I'm come from an immigrant family, so there's that expectation just from the jump. To end up with a man, but luckily my family never pushed. I think it was internalized, like it was from just you're around so many straight people. It was like I just feel as if like I wanted to be normal, and it was like even though
you didn't want to feel isolated.
Exactly, even though
where my parents weren't blatantly homophobic, I had this like urge, and I still do, and I'm trying to unlearn it, to consistently make them proud. I felt like, well, if I'd be more accepted if I was like, you know, with a boyfriend. So I would kind of just like convince myself. But in reality, I wasn't really having any fulfillment when I had these boyfriends. Like, because I still had this hole in my heart. Even when I had someone there, I was still constantly like fighting something wrong. Like I wasn't truly happy. So when I came out, it just kind of like broadened my horizons, because now I'm like, it's not that I necessarily need a boyfriend to be happy, I just need someone that I want to be with. Relationships with men were really like for validation reasons. With women and with non-binary people, it was the first time that I wasn't validating anyone, and that's how I knew it was real. Those were real relationships, real loves. Even if it didn't go into a relationship, when there were no expectations put on me, that's when I was truly in love with people.
I mentioned that because most of my teenage years I spent identifying as bisexual, and then when I was around 17 years old, right around COVID, and that time we were all stuck inside, the lesbian master doc started going around everywhere, and I read it, and I was just like, oh, oh, wait. And that was kind of the moment that I like, very, very like, you know, very internet kid type thing moment that I realized I was a lesbian. And I wasn't bisexual, that like this disdain and like kind of forcedness that I had around men wasn't like not normal. That's not how like my interactions with men are supposed to go. And after that, I kind of began exploring that side of myself. Like, you know, now we're here.
Do you feel any pressure to conform to what people want from you?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think, especially with like social media and like dating apps, it's like everyone seems to have this idea of who I am and like what I offer, or like what they can offer me. I think feeling like the lack of desirability, where I'm like my body doesn't look a certain way, like my face doesn't look a certain way, like my hair doesn't look a certain way, so I'm like, I can't be seen as an attractive person. I was like, okay, like I can be a fetish, I can be like a little like femboy or whatever, but like I can't be a full human being. I could just be like these ideas that people have in their head. But there's definitely still like those struggles internally and externally where it's like, I don't think I am. Like those moments where you feel like you're not what people want and you're not what like you want even. It's a lot of like having to tell myself that I'm not what people like think of me, or like I'm not my DMs, I'm not like what people are saying on Grindr. these assumptions and ideas can be like about me, but they don't have to define me or how I feel.
And I was able to really like hone in on like queer identity the most when I went into college, because that's when I was like out, like fully out. Most people there were queer. That was kind of like the majority in the school. But I only went there for a year. It was kind of like jarring because I was so used to being in like very artistic venues where they're like queerness is like the norm. And now all of a sudden I wasn't. Being in a business school, because at one point I went to Baruch, no one talks about it. And people are like outwardly homophobic.
I was very much like upset with them, and I wanted to fight them on the things, but I didn't have the words for it. I like talked with them about it, and I managed to make some ground, but I still couldn't find that complete happiness within me. And I think what ended up giving me the happiness is kind of just conceding the ground that I can't really change how they feel. And I don't really have to vest so much of my identity, so much stake. I don't have to like stake so much on their opinion of my identity, because my identity is something that I determine. You know, I mean, there's plenty of people on the streets who just like automatically dislike me because of the fact that I'm like visibly trans, or that I'm wearing makeup, even though I look fucking better than them all the time.
I think being queer has helped me be more willing to learn a lot more. And then there's so many things that queerness has taught me. Transness and discovering my gender identity, as well as figuring out and like kind of diving into where my gender identity fits in versus somebody who is non-passing, or somebody who is like a trans woman or trans man who's not non-binary.
As for queerness in art, that's something I just started recently doing. It's so odd, like in my brain I'm just like, I need to focus on race, you know, and push that to the forefront, because I feel like as someone who's visibly Black, that's often what we're told as artists to focus on, or like the struggle of being that. But right now I've been really focused more on like queer excellence, you know, the contributions that we make with style, with fashion, with expression.
I feel like they understand where you're coming from, and less of like, oh, they're also gay and they also been through, but like more of just like, not even get spiritual, but like on like a spiritual level. Like I feel like when you're talking about certain things, or when you're talking about like a certain idea, or even like a feeling, it's no question about it. It's like, oh yeah, like I feel that way too. Like my friend, like my best friend, they like recently came out as like non-binary, so that's like gender fluid kind of, and like when I came out as non-binary, like, you know, like there was no like, they were like, oh yeah, like pronouns they them now, like, you know, and like when they came out I was like, bro, I got you.
Me feeling comfortable in my queerness has been a relatively new thing for me that I've finally been able to like be proud of within the last couple of years. Yeah, but honestly it was my friends that really, really helped me like come out of my shell. That friend group, people like Jay and Murray and Charlie, who is the person that passed, really, and Lucy, are the people that like completely changed my life and kept me going and let me show up in my own way and staying true to myself, and like just introducing me to all these different things.
I haven't been in a room with like more than one or two trans people, like trans women specifically, like one or two trans girls since like before coming here. And all of a sudden I'm like watching Survivor with like 15 trans girls who are like screaming at the TV, and I'm like, how did this even happen? But it's like it's meant to happen. I think that's the way that like it's supposed to be. So like these people are gonna come towards each other, and they're gonna find each other like one way or the other.
The thing I appreciate about queerness is that it's ever changing. Like we take that on the spectrum shit seriously. I'm a curious being, so I find it so fun to be queer because it excites your curiosity. There's always something more to learn.
A lot of my work is centered around that feeling of like that queer people unfortunately feel, where it's like we feel alone, like we feel like unappreciated, we feel trapped, we feel like we have to code switch, and it's sad, but it's like I feel like I experience queerness, and like queerness is such a all-encompassing feeling. It's like it's so magical to be queer, and it's like you are like, when you're queer, you have a love that like survives so many like attempts to destroy it, and we're here now, and it's like I love it. Like I feel like it's so magical to me. It's so resilient to me, and I love being queer. So I feel like that's the ways it influences my work.
How do you feel when you look back on your younger self?
Oh God. Things will get better. Like, it's so hard when you're going through it. Things do get better, and also you don't have to rush yourself for figuring yourself out. Like, nobody knows what we're doing. We're at the age where we're realizing that the adults literally don't know. And there's a lot of joy and a lot of growth that can happen in the gnome, so you don't have to like force yourself to have everything figured out. And some of the things that you think you want, it's not always what you need, you know? Coming out is a personal experience, and like don't feel pressure to come out when you're ready, and when you embrace your queerness first, because once you embrace that, anyone that doesn't, you don't care. You have to let their perception of what they thought you were gonna be die, because if you don't give them that time to grieve, resentment can build up, and if they still can't accept you, you will find people that will accept you. Like, you'll find a community of friends or chosen family. Like, family's not just blood. Family is what you make it.
That's my supervisor.